The morning my daughter-in-law handed me a bag of my own clothes through a half-open door and told me the guest room was temporarily unavailable, I didn't say a word. I just stood there in the hallway of the house I had paid off 23 years ago, holding a garbage bag full of my own shirts. And I made a decision. I was done being quiet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started. I had been in St. Lee, Augustine Medical Center for 11 days. 11 days. Doctors don't keep you 11 days unless something is seriously wrong, and something seriously was. The first surgery didn't take. My left knee, which I destroyed over 31 years of working construction sites in South Carolina, had developed an infection after the replacement. They had to go back in. I came out of the second procedure weak in a way I had never felt before in 64 years of living. My temperature spiked twice. I lost 12 pounds in less than 2 weeks. When the discharge nurse finally cleared me to go home on a Thursday afternoon in March, I felt like I had survived something. And I had. What I didn't know yet was that the harder thing was still waiting for me. I had one son. His name was Bernard. He was 37 years old, and he lived in the house I owned on Calhoun Street with his wife, Melissa. They had moved in 2 years prior, right after Bernard lost his marketing job in Atlanta, and Melissa's consulting contract dried up. They came back with 4 suitcases and a plan to get back on their feet. I never charged them rent. I never asked for anything. I just wanted my son close, and I thought having family nearby might fill some of the silence that had settled into that house after my wife, June Ann, passed from a stroke 3 years ago. June Ann had been the kind of woman who made every room warmer just by walking into it. She kept fresh flowers on the kitchen table every week, even in winter. She made peach cobbler from scratch every Sunday, whether anyone was coming to dinner or not. She had loved Bernard fiercely, maybe too fiercely, in the way that mothers sometimes do when they are trying to make up for a world that feels too hard. After she died, I kept her cobbler dish on the counter, just to have something of hers in plain sight. I called Bernard from the hospital room the morning of my discharge. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. "Hey, Dad." His voice had the flat quality of someone who had been interrupted. "They're letting me go today," I said. "Around 2 o'clock. Can you come get me?" A pause. I heard a television in the background, something with a laugh track. "Today," he said. "Yes, son. Yes. The nay. They cleared me this morning." Another pause, longer this time. "Melissa's got the car at her mom's place. She took it this morning, and I've got a call with a potential client at 2:30. I really can't move. It's been hard to get this guy on the phone." I was quiet for a moment. My knee was throbbing under the blanket. "I can call you a lift," Bernard said. "I'll put it on my card. You won't have to pay anything." I looked out the hospital window at the parking lot below. A man about my age was carefully helping an elderly woman into the passenger seat of a sedan. He was holding her elbow, watching her feet, making sure she cleared the door frame. She was laughing at something, he said. "Don't worry about it," I told Bernard. "I'll figure it out." I called my neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Dottie, who had been checking my mail while I was gone. She came without a single complaint and brought me a container of soup for the ride. She helped me to the door of my own house, squeezed my arm, and told me to call if I needed anything. I watched her drive away, and then I stood on my front porch for a moment before I tried the door. It opened. That part wasn't the problem. The problem was what I found inside. The living room had been rearranged. June Ann's reading chair, the wingback she had reupholstered herself in a deep burgundy fabric, was gone. In its place were 2 matching gray Levee seats that looked like they belonged in a hotel lobby. The walls had been repainted. They used to be the warm cream color June Ann had chosen herself from a fan deck on a Saturday afternoon. Now they were a stark, cold white. I stood in the doorway of my own home and felt like a stranger. "Oh, you're here." Melissa appeared from the kitchen. She was holding her phone and didn't look up from it right away. She was a tall woman with careful hair and the kind of smile that arrived slightly after it should. "We weren't sure exactly when they were releasing you. I called this morning," I said. "Right." She glanced up briefly. "Bernard had his call. Did the lift work out?" "My neighbor brought me." She nodded, already looking back at her phone. "Good. That worked out then. I asked about June Ann's chair. Melissa told me they had donated it. It was old, she said, and the burgundy didn't work with what they were doing with the space. She said this the way you might tell someone you had thrown out an expired coupon. I didn't respond. I walked slowly to the kitchen to get a glass of water and stood there long enough to notice that June Ann's cobbler dish was gone from the counter, too. I opened the cabinet where I kept it. It wasn't there either. I found it later that evening in a box in the garage wrapped in newspaper, stacked under two other boxes of June Ann's things: her reading glasses, the ceramic cardinal she kept on the windowsill, the little framed cross-stitch her mother had made her that used to hang above the kitchen doorway, all of it in a box, all of it being quietly erased. Bernard came home around 6. He gave me a side hug and said it was good to see me looking better, though he didn't look at me long enough to actually assess how I looked. Melissa made pasta from a jar. We ate at the kitchen table without much conversation. At one point, Bernard said the client call had gone well. Melissa asked him a question about it. Neither of them asked me anything about 11 days in the hospital or what the doctor had said at discharge or how the knee felt or whether I needed help getting up the stairs. I went to bed early. The stairs took me longer than I expected. I woke up at 2 in the morning to voices, not loud ones, the low, deliberate kind that people use when they think the walls are thick enough. My bedroom was directly above the kitchen, and the old house carried sound in strange ways. June Ann and I had known this for decades. We used to hear Bernard's TV from our bed when he was a teenager. I lay still and listened. "He can't keep the whole upstairs," Melissa was saying. "He's using one room. We need the office back, and I need a space for my clients. It's his house, Melissa. For now." A pause. The sound of a cabinet closing. "Bernard, think about it practically. He's 64 with a bad knee and a compromised immune system. How long before this happens again? How long before it's worse? We need to be realistic." What does realistic mean? It means we start looking at options. Her voice was measured, practiced almost. "There's a place over in Somerville. Assisted living. It's not a nursing home. It's actually very nice. Gardens, activities, medical staff on site. It would be better for him, honestly. He's not that bad off, Melissa. Not yet, but you make these decisions before the crisis, not during it. And in the meantime, we need the space. We could rent out the master bedroom if he moves to the guest room. Or we could, he's not going to like that. He doesn't have to like it. He has to be safe and comfortable, and we have to be able to build a life here. Those things are not mutually exclusive." I stopped listening. I had heard enough. I lay in the dark and thought about June Ann. I thought about how she had always said the house had good bones. She meant the structure, the foundation, the way it had held up through 30 years of weather and repairs. But I had always taken it to mean something else. I thought she meant us. I thought she meant us. I thought she meant our family had good bones. Something underneath that would hold. I thought about the box in the garage, her reading glasses wrapped in newspaper. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. At 7 in the morning, I called my accountant, a man named Russell who had handled my finances for 15 years and who I trusted without reservation. I told him I needed to understand exactly where I stood. We talked for 40 minutes. By the time we finished, I knew 3 things clearly. The house was in my name alone. My pension and savings were solid, and I had significantly more resources than my son and his wife had likely assumed. Then I called an attorney. Her name was Adrienne Marsh, and she had been recommended to me by Russell. She specialized in estate planning and elder law and had a reputation, Russell said, for being thorough. I reached her assistant and left a message. She called me back within 2 hours. "I need to understand my options," I told her, "and I need to understand them before anyone else in my house understands that I'm looking into them." She asked me some questions. I answered them. We scheduled a meeting for the following Monday. In the days between that phone call and the meeting, I played a role. I moved more slowly than I needed to. I asked Bernard to open jars and carry things from the car. I let Melissa explain the television remote to me twice, even though I understood it perfectly the first time. I sat in their hotel lobby living room and watched their shows and said very little. I was learning. I was watching. And they were showing me exactly who they were when they thought I wasn't paying close attention. On Friday, Bernard's college friend came to visit. They sat in the living room until midnight while I was upstairs. I heard everything. At one point, Bernard said, "Honestly, I think it's going to work out. The house is worth a lot more than he realizes. Market's been good in this area." His friend said something I couldn't make out. Bernard laughed. "No, he's old school. He doesn't track that stuff. He thinks it's worth what he paid for it." I pressed my palm flat against the wall and breathed slowly. On Saturday morning, I drove myself to the pawn shop on Dorchester Road. This was not something I planned. I just found myself standing in the garage staring at the box with June Ann's things, and then I was lifting the flaps and going through it piece by piece. Her reading glasses, the cross stitch, the ceramic cardinal, and at the bottom, wrapped in a thin piece of cloth, her mother's brooch, a small oval piece, gold with a cluster of garnets, that June Ann's mother had given her on her wedding day. June Ann had worn it on every significant occasion of her life for 40 years. I had planned to give it to Bernard's daughter someday if they ever had one. It was still there. They hadn't found it or hadn't bothered with it. I stood in the garage for a long moment. I wrapped the brooch back in its cloth and put it in my coat pocket. I left the rest of the box where it was. Monday morning, I drove to Adrian Marsh's office in Mount Pleasant. She had a small practice above a dry cleaner on Coleman Boulevard, and an assistant named Helmas who brought me coffee without being asked. Adrian was in her late 50s, with silver hair cut short and reading glasses on a chain. She listened to everything I said without interrupting. She took notes in a yellow legal pad with a blue pen. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me directly. "They haven't done anything illegal yet," she said. "What they're planning to do, if your read of the conversation is accurate, would be coercing or deceiving an older adult into a care facility they don't want or need, manipulating them into relinquishing property rights. That crosses into elder financial abuse territory under South Carolina law. I don't want to involve the police," I said. "Not yet. You don't have to. What you want to do first is protect yourself structurally." She picked up her pen again. "I'm going to recommend we establish a revocable trust with very specific successor trustee language. We'll transfer the property into the trust immediately. This doesn't change your control over it at all during your lifetime, but it makes any future attempt to claim the house through guardianship or probate proceeding significantly more difficult. And if they push for power of attorney, they'll need a doctor to certify incapacity. And any doctor who examined you for 5 minutes would not certify that. But let's also get a letter from your physician on file stating your current cognitive and physical status. Dated and signed. Insurance." "I like this woman. There's something else," I said. I pulled the cloth from my coat pocket and set it on the desk between us. I unwrapped June Ann's mother's brooch and let it sit in the light. Adrian looked at it. She didn't ask what it was. She seemed to understand. "Whatever you're planning," she said carefully, "make sure you're doing it for yourself, not just for the satisfaction of it." I thought about that on the drive home. I thought about whether I was doing this out of grief or pride or justice. I decided it was all three and that none of those things made it wrong. The documentation took the better part of 2 weeks. Adrian was methodical. We transferred the house into the Elwood LL, Hadley Revocable Trust. Elwood was my middle name, the name my mother had given me after her father, and no one in that house would recognize it from any paperwork they'd seen. We updated my will, my health care directive, my financial power of attorney. We appointed Russell as my successor trustee and Adrian as my health care proxy. By the time she handed me the final folder of executed documents, my son and his wife had been legally removed from every avenue they might have used to claim any piece of my life. I put the folder in a lockbox in the trunk of my car, and then I waited. The moment they revealed themselves completely came on a Wednesday evening in April. I had made a point of going to bed early, around 8:30, complaining loudly about the knee. I lay in bed with the light off. About 20 minutes later, I heard Melissa on the phone in the hallway outside my door. She was talking in the clipped, business-like voice she used when she wanted to sound competent. "Yes, we're looking to begin the transition within 60 days, she said. "He's cooperative right now, which makes this the right window. Once he's settled in Somerville, we'll list the property. Our agent thinks we can get 480, maybe 490 if we do minor updates first. Yes, we're thinking end of summer. It gives us time to sort through whatever's left in the house." I stared at the ceiling. The knee throbbed steadily under the blanket. Whatever's left in the house. That was what she said. Whatever was left. As if the 31 years of my life contained in those rooms was an afterthought. As if Junan's things in the garage box were an inconvenience to be sorted around the sale. I closed my eyes and made my decision final. The next morning I called my old foreman, Dale, who I had worked alongside for over 2 decades and who was now retired and living in Monk's Corner. I called Dottie. I called my brother-in-law, Junan's youngest brother, who still lived outside of Charleston and who I had kept in touch with since the funeral. And I called Adrian and told her I was ready. Over the next week I made arrangements. I also started putting on a quieter version of the performance. I let Melissa catch me standing at the kitchen counter looking confused, searching for something I had already found. I mentioned twice that I had forgotten what day it was. I let Bernard help me up from the couch with a grateful, slightly bewildered expression, the expression of a man who was losing his grip on things. They responded the way I expected. Melissa softened toward me, not out of love, but out of relief. A compliant old man is easier to manage than a stubborn one. She brought me tea one afternoon without being asked. It was the nicest thing she had done in months, and it was entirely because she thought she had already won. 2 Saturdays later, Bernard sat down with me at the kitchen table with a serious expression and a manila folder. He explained that they had been looking into some options for my care and that there was a really lovely facility in Somerville with a memory care wing and a garden, and that they thought it might give me some peace of mind to have medical staff close by. He slid a brochure across the table. The cover showed an older man in a cardigan sitting in a garden. He looked serene. He looked like someone who had given up. Bernard said they had also been talking to an attorney about simplifying my financial situation. He used the word simplifying. He slid another paper across the table. It was a durable power of attorney form, partially filled out, with Melissa's name in the designated agent line. I looked at the paper for a long moment. "Can I think about this?" I asked. "Of course," Bernard said. He sounded relieved. He had expected resistance. "Give me a few days," I said. I folded the brochure and set it on top of the power of attorney form. "I'll look it all over." "That's all we ask," he said. I called Adrian that evening. She told me to sit tight. Russell had been quietly in contact with a real estate developer named Tom who had been circling properties on Calhoun Street for 2 years. Tom had made an offer. Adrian had reviewed it. I authorized the sale, not the anxious fire sale price Melissa had mentioned to whoever she was on the phone with. A fair price on my terms with a 60-day occupancy period built in. More than enough time for me to find a place I actually wanted to live. I also called Dale and asked if I could come stay with him and his wife for a while until things were settled. He said to come whenever I was ready and to bring nothing because his wife was already making up the guest room. On a Thursday morning in early May, I woke up before sunrise and moved quietly through the house for the last time. I had been bringing things out to my car in small loads over the previous 10 days, while Bernard and Melissa slept. The things that mattered. Junan's framed photographs, her mother's brooch and its cloth, the Bible my father had given me with the family names written on the inside cover in 3 generations of handwriting, my financial files, the lockbox with the trust documents. I left them the hotel lobby furniture. I left them the white walls. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes. The sun was just beginning to come up over the tree line at the end of the street. The light hit the front of the house in a way that I had always thought was beautiful, the way it came through the oak branches and made patterns on the brick. Junan used to stand on the porch on mornings like this just to watch it. I thought about her. I thought about how she had always said that you can love someone and still see them clearly. She said this about difficult people, about neighbors and relatives, and the occasional member of the church choir. She said the trick was not to let the love make you blind. I had let the love make me blind for a long time, but I could see clearly now. I started the car and backed out of the driveway. By 9 that morning, Bernard had found the letter I left on the kitchen table. It was short. I told him I was fine. I told him where I was going and that I was reachable if there was a genuine emergency. I told him that the house had been sold, the sale contract was attached, and that under the terms of the trust, he and Melissa had 60 days to find alternate accommodations. I told him the power of attorney form was not something I would be signing. He called me 11 times before noon. I answered on the 12th. "Dad, what is this? What did you do?" "I protected myself," I said. "That's all. Melissa is—" "We had plans, Dad. We were going to take care of you." "I heard your plans," I said. "Through the wall 2 months ago, and I heard Melissa's phone call 3 weeks ago in the hallway outside my room, the one about the 60-day transition window and listing the property. The silence on the line was the longest I'd ever heard from my son. The house is sold," I said. "The trust is established. You have 60 days, which is more than enough time. Use it well." I hung up and did not answer again that day. I stayed with Dale and his wife for 6 weeks while Adrian finalized everything. Dale's wife, Carol Ann, fed me like I had been in a famine. And she was not wrong about how I looked. I got some color back. The knee healed properly this time with real rest and a physical therapist who drove out twice a week. Dale and I sat on his back porch in the evenings and watched the light go down over the water and didn't always feel the need to talk. I had a long conversation with Bernard only once during that period. He had left the house on Calhoun Street and was staying with Melissa's sister in Columbia. Melissa had gone back to work, some contract position she'd secured quickly, which told me she had seen this coming and had a plan of her own. Bernard sounded tired and smaller somehow over the phone, like some piece of pressure had been released from him, and without it he didn't know what shape to be. He said he was sorry. He said he should have told Melissa no earlier. He said he didn't know how it had gotten to that point. I told him I believed he was sorry. I told him that sorry was a starting place, not a destination. I told him we could talk more when he was ready, but that I needed him to understand something first. That what I had built, the house, the savings, Junan's things, the life we had made together, none of it was a resource. None of it was an asset to be managed. It was a life, and I was still living it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I know, Dad. I'm living in a 2-bedroom rental now over in West Ashley with a screened porch that faces east. I have Junan's photographs on the walls. The ceramic cardinal is on the kitchen windowsill where it always should have been. Her mother's brooch is in a proper jewelry box on my dresser, and I have started asking around for a good appraiser because I want to know exactly what it's worth. Not to sell it, but because Junan would have wanted me to know. I fish with Dale on the weekends. I have dinner with Dottie sometimes. My physical therapist says my knee is the best she's seen it since the surgery. I sleep through the night. I don't have $80 million or a yacht or a lawyer named Steinberg who wears sharp suits. What I have is a Tuesday morning with no one telling me what to do with it, a porch that faces the sun, and the knowledge that not a single decision in my life right now was made by someone who doesn't have my interests at heart. That turns out to be worth more than you'd think. The thing I keep coming back to is the cobbler dish. Junan kept it on the counter every single day for decades, whether she used it or not. It was just there, a plain white ceramic dish with a small chip on the rim from the time I dropped it in 1991. I always offered to replace it. She always said no. She said she liked that it had a story. When I found it packed away in that garage box, wrapped in newspaper like something headed for a donation bin, I understood something I hadn't been able to name for months. The problem wasn't that my son wanted the house. The problem was that he had stopped seeing the things inside it as a life. He saw assets. He saw square footage and market value. He had looked at everything Junan and I had built and calculated what it was worth without us in it. I don't think Bernard is a bad person. I think he made a series of small choices over a long time, each one a little worse than the last, and somewhere in that process he lost the thread. That happens to people. What you allow yourself to do in private, the conversations you have when you think nobody is listening, the decisions you let slide because it's easier than pushing back, those things build up. They become who you are. Melissa didn't turn my son into someone willing to sign his father into a facility to free up a property listing. He walked there one quiet step at a time. What I had to reckon with is my own part in it. I stayed silent too long. I told myself it was patience, that I was being the bigger person, that things would sort themselves out. But the truth is, I was afraid of the conflict. I had spent so many years being the steady one, the provider, the man who didn't make a fuss, that I had confused endurance with wisdom. They aren't the same thing. Endurance without judgment is just waiting to get hurt worse. What saved me, and I mean this practically, not poetically, was that I finally decided to think. Not react, not explode, not write anyone off in the heat of the moment. Think. I called Russell. I found Adrian. I moved carefully and quietly for weeks before I made a single move they could see. That kind of patience is different from the passive kind I'd been practicing before. It's the patience of someone who has made a decision and is building toward it. It requires you to hold your anger in one hand and your plan in the other, and not let either one drop. And then you have to actually do it. That's the part nobody talks about. You can understand something completely, you can see the situation clearly, you can know what needs to happen, and still find every reason to wait one more week, give it one more chance, hope that people will surprise you. I had to get up before sunrise and load my own car in the dark and drive away from a house I had paid off 23 years ago. That was not easy. It was the right thing, and it was hard, and both of those things were true at the same time. I think about what I'd say to anyone sitting where I was sitting in those early months, watching their things get moved around, hearing their name come up in conversations they weren't supposed to hear, starting to wonder if maybe they were too old or too difficult or too much trouble. I'd say this: the clarity you're waiting for isn't coming from the outside. It's not going to arrive in the form of someone finally treating you right or finally saying what they actually mean. It has to come from you. You have to decide what you're worth and act accordingly. Not loudly, not bitterly, just firmly and with your paperwork in order. June Ann's cobbler dish is back on my counter now. The chip is still on the rim. It still has its story. So do I.